joined by Britt Longoria and her way of honoring the hunt. We get into some fascinating stories about her going to Africa as a young kid and her love for Papa Joe Hosmer. Also joined by Jen Shears, seal hunter extraordinaire. You don't want to miss how she tells government that they need to grow a backbone.
So I would like an acknowledgement of that. I would like a backbone, and I would like an acknowledgement of what people have been saying for the last 30 years on the ground, because I think there's a lot of value in that.
Wild Talk is brought to you by Trapper Gourds and Wild TV Plus.
Welcome to Wild Talk. I'm your host, Steve Hamilton. I'm joined for this segment by our good friend, Jen Shears. Hey, Jen, how you doing?
Hey, great. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. We're starting to get into some December weather here. Some snow's falling, getting into some normal temperatures. I know when you and I chatted, I think it was about a week ago, the weather there was kind of rough, a little off season. What's it looking like now?
We're buried in snow now, so I think 40 centimeters fell over the past day or so. So it's a winter wonderland.
40 centimeters? That's
Yeah.
like, for our American viewers, that's over a foot, isn't it?
Yeah, it was like up past my knees in some of the drifts. It was quite a lot.
Wow. So that's gonna work out really, really well with where we're gonna go with this conversation in a little bit, talking about some Arctic stuff. So before we jump into that, let's get a little bit about you and how did you get into hunting?
I grew up in a family that was full of avid hunters, both the men and the women. So my mom hunted my whole life, and my grandmother still gets her moose license at the ripe age of 92. She got her most recent moose last year. And basically in our family, like, if we didn't eat wild food, we didn't eat. It's basically all we served and all we had. So it was very much tied to having food on the table versus kind of like a sport feel to it, but it becomes ingrained in you. And even if you do have other options for food, you still crave it and you still want to go on the hunt. So I grew up into it. And then when Carrie and my husband, started dating when we were 15, he was a keen hunter as well. So we'd go out rabbit catching and duck hunting together, and it was part of our lives together. And now we're raising our daughter to enjoy it and live off the land as well. So it's been a lifelong thing for me.
That's pretty epic there. So when you're growing up around hunting, what was your favorite pursuit there, I guess we'd say, and your favorite thing to have on the table?
I loved the more exotic things that weren't like normal for Newfoundland families to have, like maybe bear. So my friends were always worried when they came to my house for supper because they didn't know if we were going to trick them with something. Even Carrie, I think we tricked him one time, the first time we ever got him to try a bear burger, and he ended up loving it, and then we told him what it was. I don't know if that's a good strategy to really take on, but it worked for us. So bear, moose is just, we use moose for everything here in Newfoundland. We don't have that many species that we can hunt in Newfoundland because we just have bear, moose, and woolly and caribou as our big game species. Sorry, but we had so much moose. We had everything basically was that in bear.
It takes a lot of advocacy and a lot of hard work to be able to protect and enhance our wildlife, wild spaces, the habitat, and the animals that share it. And you're one of those people that's an absolute passionate advocate for better wildlife management. And you engage on all levels. And we're going to roll to a clip here of you in front of government not too long ago, presenting on the importance of management of all species.
The ocean and the government, as it's been for many years, as far as the seal hunt goes, has a lot of invertebrates. I think a backbone needs to be grown, frankly, by people, maybe in the past, maybe in the present, because we are letting people dictate how we manage our resources, and they're dictating it based on emotion and based on some other reality that I don't know what reality that is, but it's definitely not the reality on the ground or in the oceans. So I would like an acknowledgement of that. I would like a backbone, and I would like an acknowledgement of what people have been saying for the last 30 years on the ground, because I think there's a lot of value in that.
That's duly noted. I appreciate the vertebrae example in terms of having backbone and resolve to this.
That thing still sticks in my head. I absolutely love that clip. So can you explain a little bit about what that presentation was about?
Yeah, so I am in the seal industry. I have a business that specializes in seal fur products. But beyond that, as you said, I'm just an advocate for sustainable wildlife management and peaceful coexistence with wildlife. And yeah, they invited me up there to present and to have to answer some questions at the Parliamentary Committee on Fisheries and Oceans as far as it pertained to seals. And I just thought, if I'm finally getting my chance to sit in front of some people who have some sway, I gotta make it impactful, and I just gotta tell them like it is, and just basically bring what everyone's been saying in Newfoundland, Labrador, and many maritime parts of Canada for years. And so I did. I told them what I thought, and of course I gave them some real tangible strategies on how they could achieve obtaining a backbone and growing a spine. But yeah, as far as coastal communities here in Newfoundland and Labrador go, the seal issue is a big one because they're having dramatic impacts on our fisheries and on themselves. And no one wants to see a population die of disease and starvation from overpopulation. So there's a perfect balance possible here. It's just we need the people with power to come on board and to fight for us like we're willing to fight for ourselves. And no one wants to see a population die of disease and starvation from overpopulation. So there's a perfect balance possible here. It's just we need the people with power to come on board and to fight for us like we're willing to fight for ourselves.
You talked about wildlife management, and you need to do it across all species to do it properly. And like it or not, we have an impact on the landscape the minute we started walking on 2 feet, and we need to manage it accordingly. Anybody who's followed you on social media has seen your post. You talked about it here. You hunt seals. So what's your experience with hunting seals? How'd you get into that?
So I'm a commercial sealer. We first started with seal products before I had been out sealing, it was a beautiful textile. As you can see behind me, there's a seal pelt. And so we started making boots and coats and hats and mitts and things with it. And I thought, if I'm going to stand up and claim to be able to speak knowledgeably about this activity, I need to go out and go at it. So I am a commercial sealer now, and as well as a commercial fish harvester. So when I'm out in the boat at crab fishing, you're throwing back the undersized ones as a conservation measure, and then you see the heads bobbing there of the seals waiting for you to throw those small ones back so they can go and eat them. So on one end, you're trying to conserve the snow crab and the seals, which have no form really of population regulation happening currently. Just go and have a feast. So yeah, seal hunting is unlike any other hunt I've ever done. You go out in an open boat in like April when there's ice flows out everywhere, and you kind of cruise along, hope you don't have a Titanic incident with a chunk of ice. And you got the captain steering, and then you're always waiting to see if you can see the seals on the ice, and then you approach them as close as you can. And then you take a shot out of a rifle. My rifle of choice is a 22-250, so it's quite a high caliber rifle, and there's certain specifications for the level of the power of rifle that you need to use for that activity. A lot of people think that we just walk up to them and club them on the head, but that's not how it is. I will say though that if you do see people hitting it on the head, it is a prescribed part of the hunt though, as the second step. So after you take the shot, you need to go up to the seal, you need to feel the skull, and if the skull isn't fully kind of obliterated, you are required by law to hit it with a hack-a-pick to ensure that the skull is crushed before you proceed to the next step. So that's one of the biggest things that I struggle with the seal hunt, is that what we do to make the seal hunt humane provides perfect propaganda for the antis because it looks so brutal, but it's in the name of being humane. So I don't know how to reconcile those two things. But being out there is a ton of fun, and just it's as dangerous as any hunt could possibly be. You're out in open ocean water full of ice chunks, and it's amazing though. I absolutely love it out there.
Yeah, taking a life is never easy, no matter what aspect you're doing of it. If it's bonking a fish on the head, some people have that they've reconciled that a little easier. But the way I look at it is, in order for us to live, something has to die, and it's a necessary part of being on the landscape and doing what we do, right? Whether or not you're a vegetarian, a vegan, meat eater, you're all directly or indirectly taking from the landscape, and animals are dying. And you touched on it there with the emotive side of coming up, and there's always those pictures that the those against the seal hunt like to share on the social media. And there's a famous one, and I know you know it, is where that guy's standing over top of the seal with the club.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be a tough one for me to reconcile as well. But again, as you say, it's legislated, and ultimately it ensures a humane, quick kill. It's such a touchy thing, and you mentioned about needing a backbone to deal with it properly. And I'm glad there's people like you who are out there actively trying to manage them in a sustainable way and using them, as evidenced by that beautiful pelt behind you. And I know a lot of our viewers are going to have a question, and I know some of the aspects of it, but what happens with the meat there?
So there is use for the meat as well as the fat. We bring it in and render it into omega-3 oil. So there are businesses that sell omega-3 oil capsules for humans and also oil for pets. You can buy it and insert it into pet food. So yeah, the meat flippers are a big traditional part of the seal that people like to eat, but the loins are really, really good. And I've been at some events where chefs have kind of taken it, and some, not for the newer generation in Newfoundland, it's like the biggest compliment is it doesn't taste like seal. There's a bit of a fishy taste, I guess, that can be on it sometimes, but there are ways you can cook it, especially the loins, where you don't get that taste. And yeah, it's incredible. If we could just even get to open up more markets, because there are parts in the world that are looking for more seal meat and seal oil, but because of the ill-conceived bans that are out there, it makes it a lot harder for us to be able to actively harvest and market and export the meat products. But yeah, it's a beautiful protein, incredibly rich. It could probably solve world hunger if we could figure out a way to get it to the places. There's so many seals. The quota for every year is 400,000, but because markets are closed overseas, there's only enough demand to harvest like 35 to 40,000 a year. So you can see where that's going numbers wise. So it's quite scary. There's so many seals. The quota for every year is 400,000, but because markets are closed overseas, there's only enough demand to harvest like 35 to 40,000 a year. So you can see where that's going numbers wise. So it's quite scary.
So only a tenth of the population at best is being harvested out of of the total quota.
NDFO has said they would likely need to raise the quota, but there's no sense in raising it if we're not even approaching it. I think they need to tell people what number it needs to be, though, because that's the only way you'll really see how big the gap is between what scientists are saying need to be harvested to keep the population sustainable versus what we are actively taking.
That's incredible. I had no idea that the quota was that high.
It is, yeah.
That's hard to fathom, that there's that many, that's the sustainable number, and you're still only touching a tenth of it at best.
Yeah, there's about 10 million off the coast of Newfoundland and Labrador of harp seals alone.
Holy.
Yeah, so you can imagine what that's doing. When you look at the numbers of what seals consume versus total allowable catches of fisheries, it's not even comparable. So commercial fishermen always get the bad rap for overfishing, but I don't know the numbers, but it's really minuscule, the total allowable catch for commercial fisheries versus what seals are taking.
Wow.
It's devastating and it's scary.
Yeah, same out here. It's just such a mismanagement of our precious resources, and it kind of makes me sad for where our grandkids are going to be if things don't change here and across Canada. It's scary. It really is.
And that's what gets me is that no one, I don't think, is denying that there's a problem. It's just no one has the courage to step up and fight for it. And that's not how I roll. So that's why I get my back up a little bit on the topic, because it's really frustrating for me.
Let's pivot to something a little more palatable, I guess. What's your most memorable hunt? You've got to have something. I know you were out here my way not too long ago with a pretty cool hunt. So let's talk about what would be your most memorable hunt.
I always find that such a hard question because each hunt has different memories and different reasons why they were so special. When we were in Yukon, probably in 2020, in COVID, Carrie and I and Aspen, who was 7 at the time, we went on like a 2-week backpack hunt in the mountains for Dall sheep. So she was with us, and prior to that, really she was in our bear stand, or she was doing a little jaunt for moose and across a bog or something, and that was kind of throwing her in head first. But the fact that we survived it as a family and came out still liking each other was like a testament to the success of it. Another hunt that I adore was my bighorn hunt. Carrie and I were in the mountains in Alberta, and we ended up doubling on the same day on 2 separate stalks. And then it was like a 2-day pack out without a tent, without shelter or anything. We slept on the mountains for 2 nights on our way back out to base camp. So those are some of my more memorable hunts for those toughness and family reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know those ones where you hate every minute of it while you're out there, and then the minute that plane lands, you're like, oh, it's over? I need to go back? No.
Right
I
away,
don't
like,
want to
let me
do
get
that.
back in here. I know, yep.
Oh, we did a fly-in this year, and we landed in a break in the weather, and it was good, but we knew things were starting to roll. We were mid to late September, and we ended up, by the second night, the tent was whipping so hard we had to hold the pole in the middle. We had a TP style tent. We had to hold the pole because the wind was whipping so hard, and it actually bent the pole in the middle. We ended up with probably 4 inches of snow overnight, and then it got above zero, and everything up in the alpine above us melted. So we're at the edge of a lake, and things got to flow to the lake. We had to trench around it, and it was miserable. We were cold, we were wet, and the plane landed on time, and we're like, damn it, it's time to go.
What did I say?
Like, can't wait for this to be over, and damn it, it's over. Let's go back.
For sure. That was like my moose hunt last year. When you talk about wind, that's probably one of my top memorable ones as well. Like, when you've done so many, they kind of all blur. But where I go moose hunting, it's like a 2-hour walk in there before I really get into where I like to hunt, and then a 2-hour walk back out, of course. So in order to get in there at a prime hunting time in the morning, you really need to leave well before daylight. In order to get back out before dark, you need to leave right when prime time is starting. So I said, finally, after 2 weeks of doing that and saying I'm missing all the prime hunting time, I figured I was going to pack in and stay overnight in tent. So I did. I was on my way driving down there. Carrie was out in St. John's, and he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going in for the night. And it was blowing a gale. It was like 90 kilometers an hour. He said, Jen, you're crazy. There's no point of going in. And I said, well, it's literally the only day in my calendar I can do this overnight to catch the evening hunt and the subsequent morning hunt. So I trudged in through the wind and the rain, set up my tent, went up to my lookout where I go, started making a few calls. And as soon as I started calling, the wind died out flat, not a breath of wind. And I was like, I'm feeling something's going to happen here. And then after a few calls, about 400 yards away, I just saw the flash of the antlers coming towards me. When it got to like 75 yards, and I'm trying to film it as well. And so we got to 75 yards. I didn't know if the moose was still in the field of view of the camera. So I decided to shoot, but I'm pretty sure he would have came right in and walked in on top of me like he was coming in possessed. And I got him down, and it was close to darkness, and I spent all evening and all night, probably till about 2 a.m., trying to break it down. And it was a super awesome experience. When the guys came in to help lug it out, they said, "Who was in here helping you break that down last night?" I said, "Nobody, just me, myself, and the wind." But that's a good one for me. It was a super awesome experience. When the guys came in to help lug it out, they said, "Who was in here helping you break that down last night?" I said, "Nobody, just me, myself, and the wind."
I think I saw that video on your social. You've got like a headlamp on, and didn't you end up with a sweatshirt that said Moose Whisperer or Moose Whisperer
I did,
Newfoundland or
yeah.
something?
So that was in October, and Carrie gave me that sweatshirt, Newfoundland Moose Whisperer, for Christmas. So that was pretty sweet, yeah.
That's awesome. You talked a little bit about getting your kids into the outdoors. So, what does it mean to be a figure that girls and women and people in general can look up to in the hunting world? Because you're one of them, like it or not.
Yeah, I struggle with that sometimes. Try to put the best face forward for it. But yeah, I was fortunate, like I said, to have strong women as my role models, but I can only imagine what it's like if you didn't have that. And even with all the hunting that I've done in my life, I've walked into some hunting camps and felt lesser than, and felt like maybe people didn't think I belonged. I was in one camp one time, and I was the hunter, and Carrie was just coming along to film, and the hunter walked right up to Carrie and shook his hand. Thought I was just the wife tagging along, and I didn't get the greatest vibe from him, but it can be intimidating. So I just want women and girls to see that you can do it. And I don't proclaim to be like an alpha. I'm very beta. So I think it's great because you need people to see that you don't need to be the best of the best to get out and to enjoy and to provide for your family. You can just be someone who's really stubborn, and I think that's my strongest suit in terms of getting out there and getting it done. So being able to see someone that isn't claiming to be perfect or the best getting out and getting it done is huge, and I think a lot of women do appreciate that, and men as well, because they send me messages saying, "My wife was totally against getting out there, but I showed her your videos, and now she's going to tag along with me for my elk hunt." And if 90% of the messages I get are hate, the 10% of that good stuff makes it worthwhile for me. Like, I don't need the BS that comes along with putting myself out there. I've got enough going on in my own world, but those 10% of the message that show it's worthwhile and it's helping people and families, that makes it all worthwhile for me.
Before we wrap this up, I want to know, who's your hunting inspiration, either past or present?
Oh my goodness. Hunting inspiration. My nan, for sure. My mom as well. So it's not these, again, alpha big scale people. It's very much the people close to me that did it to provide and did it because they loved it. Not for the glitz and glam of showy cameras and TV shows and stuff, but because it got them by. And for them, I can't think of anything that meant more to them in their lives than getting out there, harvesting the food, bringing it back and preparing and serving it for their family. Like, how empowering is that? So in a time when maybe it wasn't common for women to be doing that, and maybe people looked down on them for doing that, it showed me a strong way to be. So they're my inspirations. And of course my dad, because I don't know if my mom would have necessarily been at it if it weren't for my dad. So then, and Carrie as well. He's one of the best hunters I know. So yeah, really tight knit in terms of my family, in terms of my hunting inspiration.
Jen, I think that's a great way to end it right there. So thanks from all of us at Wild Talk and Wild TV for joining us. We love what you're doing. Thanks for being such a positive inspiration and a hardcore advocate for doing what you do, what we do for us. So thanks again, Jen. Have a good day.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you again. Hey everybody, welcome back to Wild Talk.
Today, Steve and I are joined by Britt Longoria, a longtime hunter residing out of Texas, and let's dive into it.
So, Britt, you and I go back a couple of years now. We've had quite a few conversations online and had you on a podcast or two. And when we started planning out this episode, talking about women in hunting, you're the first name that came to mind. So, thanks for joining us on the show today.
I appreciate it. So fun to be on. Thank you so much.
So, as Kaylee said, we just want to dig right into this. You've got quite the story about your journey into hunting, and it started at an early age. You were 11 or something when you got out there with Papa Joe, and then you were 15 when you went to Africa to work, and that's got to be daunting. So let's talk about what sparked that love for hunting with you.
My initial introduction to hunting was bird hunting. I grew up with bird dogs. So I was a big grouse hunter, woodcock hunter. I loved being able to talk. I loved the weather. I loved having cute clothes. It wasn't like wearing my brother's big giant camo stuff. I mean, I could enjoy I can enjoy it versus it freezing and being quiet and still. That as a young girl, that wasn't as exciting. So I would definitely say that birds were my kind of gateway drug into the outdoors, into hunting. When I was 15, my parents finally let me go to Africa by myself. They put me on a plane, and I got picked up by a friend that had a safari company, and I worked my summers through high school, through everything from skinning animals to learning how to build blinds to bartending to essentially learning the service industry as well as the hunting industry.
Yeah, 15 going to Africa on your own, that's got to be quite daunting in itself.
Probably more for my folks than for me.
Whereabouts in Africa did you head?
South Africa. So a very, very easing into wild Africa, I guess.
So, like, for somebody who's never been there, would this be like the beginning African safari style?
Yes, we joke that it's like the Diet Coke of Africa. It's easy to get to. There's, wonderful highways and great hospitals and medical systems in case of emergency. You can get anywhere by road. I mean, you're not needing to take bush planes onto charter flights and puddle jumpers into deepest darkest Africa. It's very easy. It's great for a first hunt. It's great for families, and I would just say that was, like I said, a kind of the gateway into just being in awe of Africa.
The other thing I've heard about Africa is that you can't just go once. You go and you are bit by the bug.
It,
Obviously, that's something you found yourself.
100%. It literally gets in your blood, and before you have left, you are already planning your next safari.
What were the things you were doing there when you were 15?
A little bit of everything. I mean, everything. I mean, it truly was all encompassing, from getting supplies and organizing table settings to training cooking staff to gutting animals to managing the taxidermy and the exporting permits to measuring, doing the SCI measurements for clients. So literally everything, every aspect, driving.
How did your parents' attitude towards you being over there change as you got older?
I don't, this sounds horrible, but I didn't really think of their feelings. It was all just the excitement. It was just, this was my biggest dream and passion. So it was my greatest adventure as a young lady.
How did your parents' attitude towards you being over there change as you got older?
I don't, this sounds horrible, but I didn't really think of their feelings. it was, it was all just the excitement. It was just, this was my biggest dream and passion. So it was, you know, my greatest adventure.
From following you on social media for a few years, I've definitely seen quite the gamut of animals that you've taken over in Africa itself, not just South Africa, and it's still a bucket list for me, and I have to get to it. What can we do as a hunting community to help break down any barriers for those looking to get into hunting, or at least those curious about why we do what we do? That's something you really talk about well on your social media is the why.
I would say that more and more with, as you're saying, with women becoming more interested, I think a big part of it is being self-sufficient, of having the understanding of I can do this myself. I don't I have the empowerment to go out there and provide for my family. And I also think that there's a massive cultural shift of people wanting to be more educated on where their food comes from. That they want a connection with, okay, here is, meatloaf tonight, and I know exactly what that animal ate. I know exactly where it came from. I understand kind of the bigger picture of how I am nourishing myself and my family. And I think that those two elements of being self sufficient and empowered to take ownership of where our food comes from, and then also for our kids and our family, what we're feeding each other in those settings, I think are probably the two main driving factors of women becoming more and more interested. I call it hunting curious, where it's like, I don't know if I'm comfortable with this. I don't know about the emotional side of this, but I want to dabble in it. I want to try it. And I think that that is such a cool thing to see more and more people getting involved with, especially on a later stage, because very often hunters were always in a hunting family, that it was more of a tradition, where it was like, I got into it because my father and my family went hunting.
I sit on the sidelines there and I watch it and I see social media can be a beautiful thing and it can be a terrible thing. And I see some of the comments that are made to women and it drives me absolutely nuts. And I applaud people like you, Britt, and you, Kaylee, that are doing your best to kind of shift that that old school thinking to one of getting out there and saying, you know what, we can do this as well. So let's pivot a little bit, Britt. And where a lot of people are going to know your name is from 2018, I believe it was, a full on targeted hate campaign towards you. You were you posted a picture holding a leopard that you'd legally taken on an African hunt. And I know from speaking to you in the past that this was a catalyst for a journey and some and reflection on your end. And ultimately, the amount of hate you received, and you still see it on some of your social media pages. Some people 5, 6 years later are bringing up that picture still. So you've spun this into a positive for you, and it was quite opening for the hunting community itself. So let's talk about what happened there. Like, let's dial right back on the picture itself.
I actually didn't post it. I never publicly shared it. I had no desire to be a public hunter. Let's call myself a closet hunter. I work very much in the conservation environmental field of nonprofits internationally. And all of the clients that I've worked for, that they weren't necessarily hunting organizations, and they understood that I was personally a hunter, but that wasn't their mission, that wasn't their topic. So it was acknowledged in the boardroom, but not in in the limelight. So I had submitted the the trophy photo with the measurements to Safari Club, and it was on their online record book, which is only accessible by membership. Well, obviously, they can't always find out who and what the intentions are of the quote unquote members that have access to it. So there was obviously a troll that pulled it, and it went viral. I actually heard about it from friends in Africa that said, "Hey, this is have you seen this?" And I was like, "No, what are you talking about?" And it literally went around the world. The general population of the world and the internet has no idea who Britt Longoria is. That this isn't about me personally. This is about hunting. This is about hunters. This is about anyone. That this isn't about me personally. This is about hunting. This is about hunters. This is about anyone. Sure, it might be more alarming to the general public to see a predator, an iconic, identifiable, charismatic leopard where someone says, "Oh my gosh, it's dead. How can something so beautiful be posed with a big smile?" And it was the classic kind of safari stance where I'm holding up the leopard. And I was probably my biggest smile was that I could actually lift it, that I was very into CrossFit at the time, and I was very excited that I was picking up a 190-pound leopard. And I was just ecstatic. And as hunters, we understand the emotion of being happy over a death, but it's not that I am conquering an animal. It's the culmination of a completion of a long journey. And through this aha moment and understanding that it wasn't about me personally, I started to question, what do these types of images mean? What does it mean beyond our community? Where I can show you a photo, holding a white-tailed deer and, grip and grin, and I'm happy, and you're like, wow, that's awesome. And you can understand what I'm communicating. But if I show that same image to a non-hunter, it doesn't convey well. It doesn't tell our story. So how do we, as people that are sharing things online and have access to storytelling platforms, whether it's Instagram or Pinterest or Facebook or Twitter, now X, or whatever, how are we able to share what we do in a snapshot, in a 2-3 second, as someone scrolling through, and be able to convey why it's important enough for us to share on a public platform? And that's kind of my journey that I've had over the past 5 years of trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. How can we collectively, as hunters, be able to not just share because we are proud of what we do and who we are, but then also explain to someone who's never experienced hunting? And we are always going to be going through a situation where the majority of the population is not hunting, it is not hunters. So if we're sharing on a platform where most people never felt that, we've got to do a better job of telling our story.
Speaking of doing great work in positives, you recently got an award for your contributions to the hunting community. Let's talk about that a little bit.
So Ricardo is my husband. Ricardo and I are extremely honored. We received notification of the African Professional Hunters Association Salute Award. The Salute Award is chosen by the African continent's best professional hunters, the best guides on the continent. And it is in recognition not of trophy size or number of species, but rather attitude of field. How do we process success and failures? How do we, what are we as hunters when no one's watching? What are our ethics? What are our morals? How do we give back to conservation, to communities? What do we do? Again, more just kind of an all around award for hunting, but what's so special is that it was selected by guides and outfitters. So it's extremely humbling to be able to say that they've chosen us together to honor this year. So it's extremely humbling to be able to say that they've chosen us together to honor this year.
Have you received any other awards? I heard through the grapevine there was a Diana Award. Can you tell us about that?
So in 2021, I was the Safari Club International Diana Award recipient, and that is, I would say that's the highest honor for a woman to receive in the hunting world. And it is very much a lifetime achievement award. I mean, there are some incredible ladies that I am just in awe of, that I'm recognized on the same level as them. And I'm the youngest recipient. So it feels very gratifying because it, even though it's a lifetime achievement award, I have been hunting my life, my lifetime. So it's a very special thing.
Yeah, you've certainly kicked down some doors, and you're as humble as they come, Britt. And you can even see that, for lack of a better term, putting you on the spot about these awards, you kind of withdraw and you don't want to really talk about them. Just sing it from the rooftops. You've earned these recognitions for doing the great work you've done. So as we wrap this up here, I want to know, this might be a tough question. What do you feel the greatest threats to hunting are, and what can we do about it?
I would say the greatest threat is our inability to tell our story. I would say that it is not facts and figures. It's not how we have been educated to defend hunting. I don't, yes, I hunt to fill the freezer, but that's not why I go out and choose to go hunt a deer versus go buy a steak at the supermarket. There is something intangible that's emotional, that is hard to describe, and kind of tying back to kind of that narrative where yeah, sure, hunting is male dominated, and it's often difficult for men culturally to be put into situations where they have to talk about their emotions, especially publicly.
Mhm.
But that is what's going to save hunting, is our ability to tell our why from our heart versus from our head.
Beautifully put. There's only so many times you can hear. Did you know that there used to be 30,000 turkeys? They're on the verge of extinction. Now there's 3 million of them. Numbers, the science doesn't lie, but the emotion is what's going to resonate with people. I commend what you've done with everything, and standing up to the hate the way you do. And I'll take a phrase right out of your books: the way you honor the hunt. It's all, you're doing the right thing, and keep kicking down those doors, my friend. So I'd like to thank you from everybody at Wild TV, myself and Kaylee especially, for doing what you do and for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate it. Thanks, Kaylee.
Wild Talk is brought to you by Trapper Gourds and Wild TV Plus.